related to SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, the current pandemic, which is not over yet. Today is April 16. The discussion that I want to do today is very interesting. It is actually very fascinating for me as well. And that is, there's a lot of discussion about Sweden and the way Sweden is managing the pandemic or epidemic or outbreak in their own country, and the way it is panning out. So I thought that we should look at the way Sweden is handling. It is almost as towards the herd immunity, although to be fair to the Swedish administration, they have not said that we are moving towards, we want to establish the herd immunity by doing what we are doing, but they do have a partial lockdown or almost no lockdown. The lockdown is interesting that people are still allowed, 50 people are allowed to gather, high schools are closed, the junior highs and junior schools are still open, and people are going about doing their work. There are some changes in their behavior. For example, the travel has dropped by 50%. 50% of the population is working from home. But the question really, once again, is the experiment that Sweden is doing is different from the rest of us. It is different from the rest of the community or other countries. Many of the countries have gone in lockdown. Sweden has not, number one. Number two, UK had started off with this similar approach to say, no lockdown, let's just go ahead and see what happens with the herd immunity. And very quickly, they had to take an about turn, go back to the lockdown. So with this, let's look at how Sweden is doing. Is this working for them? Is this not working for them? The takeaway that I want us to all have from this discussion is that with the way Sweden is experimenting, what will happen now, what has happened till now, and what will happen in 2 months from now, and then what would happen possibly when the pandemic is over, or in another 3-4 months when herd immunity may be established. And what will it take to establish the herd immunity? So for this discussion, a few things to keep in mind. The data shows, for the current pandemic countries data, that shows that someone who becomes seriously ill, that is the 20% of the people who become seriously ill, actually 14.5%, they end up in the hospital and they stay there between 2 weeks to 6 weeks. So keep this in mind, that a person who is seriously ill will require hospitalization for up to 6 weeks. And in that time, hopefully they would recover and go back, and there can be other outcomes as well. People who are critically ill, 5% of the hospitalized, 5% of the whole number of cases sick, they would need ventilation and they would stay in the hospital anywhere from 3 weeks to 8 weeks. So it is possible that right now in Sweden and in other countries, people who are seriously ill or critically ill hospitals, and they might stay there till 6 to 8 weeks. So the right outcome will not be known if we freeze the pandemic today. If we say no more infections, the whole world stops today with more spread. And if you wanted to have the data, you cannot have the data until another 2 months are passed, when those patients who are in the hospital have either recovered and gone home or have passed away. So this is something that has to be kept in mind, that data cannot be completed until another 6 to 8 weeks. So now let's see what Sweden is doing. What's saying, we are trying to, let me share my screen for a second to show you what their health minister is saying. So they are saying, here is their chief epidemiologist, Anders Tegnell's statement. They are saying, we want to have a slow spread that does not overwhelm the healthcare system. So keep this in mind. They want to have a slow spread that does not overwhelm the healthcare system. In this process, they have done a few things that are different from the remaining countries' lockdown. Before that, I wanted to also show you that Sweden, I really love Sweden because my best friend, Jan Rosen, this is Jan Rosen, is from Sweden. And we have been working together since, I believe, 2003. Here, Jan Rosen is playing some drums. So we have been working together in professional capacity since 2003, and we've been very good and deep friends. So going to Sweden, here is what they have done. Number one, they have said that we want people to take personal responsibility for social distancing. And just to, I had gone over this talk with Jan Rosen before I'm talking with you. I just was speaking with him about half an hour ago. Jan mentions that in Sweden, normally they observe social distance by default. That is that they kind of do not meet strangers and they do not go near strangers that often. So you may have seen pictures of Sweden bus stops where people are kind of maximizing the distance between each other. That is one. Number two, Sweden's population density is very low. So it is 25 people per square kilometer compared to Italy or Spain, where the density is about 260 people per square kilometer. So there is a natural social distancing built into the culture plus into the population's architecture. Having said that, there is one more important thing to keep in mind, that Sweden, Stockholm city, for example, has a population density of 4,800 people per square kilometer. That is a very high population density. So any experiment with the herd immunity can really damage Sweden's population. So now let's look at what they're trying to do. I'm fascinated by their approach at this time, and I want to see what would go on. So look at this. They're saying we want people to take personal responsibility. Semi-high schools are closed. Primary and junior high are still open. So people are still, the primary school kids and junior high kids are still going to the schools. So of course, we know that children who become sick may be asymptomatic, but they would come back and bring the disease back to their parents and their parents. So that is a risk they are taking. Then they have banned gatherings of more than 50 people. So interestingly, up to 50 people are allowed to gather. I believe that restaurants are open, the schools are open, I believe cafes are open, but bars are closed. High death rate due to... So what is happening is, and I'll show you the statistics in a second, Sweden actually has very high death rate for the SARS-CoV-2. And their epidemiologist says that the high death rate is because of the spread in the nursing home. The question is that sounds like an interesting excuse, but why are the nursing home people becoming sick? That is because others who are going out are getting sick or bringing the SARS-CoV-2 back into the nursing homes. If maybe they were under the lockdown, this will not be happening. But this is their explanation, that the high death rate is because of the nursing homes. 50% of the population at this time are working from home. 50% of the travel has reduced. And this is interesting that greater than 50% of their households are single person households. Half of their household is single person household, which is very, very interesting. Population density, as I said, 25 kilometers. Stockholm's population density is 4,800 people per kilometer. This is a huge deal. 4,800, that's a lot of people per square kilometer. Okay, so now with this, I'm going to show you the data, but I also want to show you that Sweden is aware that this is still going to have some economic outcome. So their finance minister, Magdalena Andersson, he said that GDP could shrink by 10%. And Sweden's GDP in 2018 was $556 billion. So reduce that by 10%, that is their economic projection, and then take the unemployment rising to 13.5%. Their current unemployment is 7.6%. So about 700,000 Swedes are out of job. So Swedish population is about 10 million. So about 700,000 or 800,000 people are not working in Sweden. And Magdalena Andersson says that this would rise to 13.5. So another 700,000 people will become out of job. So this is what they are projecting. Now let me show you the data to say, is this really working? So let's look at it. So I have put some interesting data over here. There are some countries, for example, Spain, Italy, US, Germany, that I've put them here just for an example of countries which may not be doing good. And then these countries are neighboring countries to Sweden: Denmark, Norway, Finland. These Scandinavian countries are the neighbors for Sweden, and we can see what they are doing. They all, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, have implemented lockdowns. Sweden is the one that has not implemented the lockdown. So let's see what is happening in Sweden. Sweden, the first case was reported on January 23. And this is an important date to keep in mind because their chief epidemiologist has said that other countries are doing better because they are at a different time curve, which is wrong because their neighbors had first cases in the similar time frame. Denmark had the first case on 123, Norway had the first case on 122, and Finland had the first case on 122. So he is wrong in saying that they are at a different epidemiological or different phase because they all started together. Now, Sweden has a population of 10 million, about 10 million, a little more than that. They have, till today, 12,540 cases. I used the data from Johns Hopkins. So if I go here, this is the Sweden here, 12,540 cases. And how many deaths? I have written that down here, but I wanted to show you where I'm getting the data. So 1,333 deaths. This makes case rate, the number of cases that from the population are 0.13%. Keep this in mind that case rate for Italy, for example, is 0.3. That is almost triple. Case rate in Italy is 0.28, which is almost triple as well. US case rate is 0.22, which is double. Germany's case rate is similar to Sweden. So interestingly, without lockdown, they have a case rate which is much better than many other countries with lockdown, or almost equal to the countries with lockdown. Can you imagine this? That this is the good part of what they're doing, or successful part of what they're doing. Rate. Number of people getting sick out of is actually lower than many other countries and almost equal. Look at the countries below. Denmark, Norway almost have the similar case rate. Finland has a 0.06 cases. So their non-lockdown is causing a spread which is similar to the other countries around them, other than the Finland. So that is an interesting part. That is a good part. What are they doing that without the lockdown, they're still becoming sick with the same case rate as the other countries which have the lockdown? So I'm hearing here, your analysis may be wrong. The curve is the advanced, but the integral outcome will drop when both reach 10% of the peak. I understand that, and I wanted to just look at the freezing the time now and look at what we are seeing in the data. So, and again, just a disclaimer, I am not an epidemiologist nor a statistician. I want to see what is the success they are seeing so far compared to others, and where are the risks that they are seeing. So, interestingly, without lockdown, their case rate is actually much lower than many countries that are in the lockdown. However, their death rate is very high, 10.63%. And this death rate is almost equal to the other countries that have the lockdown and are experiencing death rate. And look at this: Spain 10.46, Italy 13.12, US 4.74, Germany 2.86. But look at their neighboring countries that are in the lockdown, and they have similar demography in the Scandinavian countries like Sweden. So look at that, 4.54 for Denmark, which is almost 2.5 times lesser deaths in Denmark. Norway 2.22%, which is about 5 times less deaths in Norway. Finland 5 times less deaths. If you look at the number of deaths here, 1333, 321, 152, 75, we can give them this. Look, the population of the other Scandinavian countries is almost half of the Sweden. So we can say, all right, for the data point of view, let's linearly double them. Let's make them all 10 million, which will mean let's double all of this, although I know that this is not a linear extrapolation, but let's do that for our naive way of looking at it. Even then, the death rates will be almost the same. So number of deaths will be half. And in case of Finland, if we compare that, the number of deaths will be 5 times lesser. So my understanding from this is that what they have done is their spread rate compared to the out of the whole population or infection rate is similar to their neighbors, but their death rate is very high. And the epidemiologist, the chief epidemiologist, his point of view was that this death rate is high because the nursing homes are becoming sick more, and 30% of the population in Sweden is above 55 years of age. So that means about 3 million people are above 55 years of age. And so there is a risk out there. The other thing that is interesting is that if we go down here and look at this for a second, let's say we want to create the herd immunity. We had done this discussion before as well at two or 3 days ago, where I talked about the herd immunity. Herd immunity will be the reproductive number of this virus is between 2 to 3. That means that one person can make 2 to 3 people sick. Normally, we would like to have a reproductive number of 1, and we'll say that the disease is stable, that one person is only able to make one other person sick. Here we have 2 to 3 people getting sick. So if I take the 2 people as the reproductive number, and then I see that how many people need to become immune to create herd immunity, then 50% of the population, that means 5 million people either have to become vaccinated or they have to contract the disease, they have to become sick and develop immunity. Now, if we say that 500 million people over here, 500 million people, if they become sick, and then the death rate is still 10.63%, then there will be 500,000 deaths. Although please realize that number one, I hope that no country would allow 500,000 people to become sick. People will start observing social distancing and staying at home automatically when they'll see other people dying. And secondly, the death rate would actually increase when the medical system will become overwhelmed. Then there will be people who cannot receive medical attention, and the death rate would start increasing. If we take the reproductive number to 3, that is one person making 3 people sick, then there will be 666, meaning about 67% of the people that need to be immune. That means either they become vaccinated or they become immune by contracting the disease. If that is the case, 708,000 deaths would occur. Again, I am extrapolating that maybe this can happen in 2 months or 3 months, or as the chief epidemiologist said, Andre Tegnell, that a slow spread that does not overwhelm the healthcare system. So far in this experiment, my understanding is that the experiment is actually interesting in two ways. One is the spread rate, infection rate is very similar to their neighbors and actually lower than other countries with lockdowns, but death rate is very high. So that is my understanding. I actually think that they should stop this experiment and they should impose some lockdowns. For example, people who are working in nursing homes, they should not be asked to go out because they are in contact with the nursing homes. For example, essential services can stay open and other services should close down. For example, 50 people together. Instead of that, maybe 2 people or 1 person or just the family, maybe carry out. So again, every country is trying to figure it out by themselves. Look, coronavirus is so democratic that it has made the whole world equal, that all countries, advanced or poor, have a similar problem to solve. Nobody has a solution, nobody has a vaccine, nobody has enough resources, and nobody is immune. So everything has become equal. Every country, every human being is experimenting in their own way. Maybe, so there is an interesting thing to think about with Sweden, and that is, okay, they are letting the herd immunity develop. Maybe after 4 months, they would have better immunity in their community. And we would, after the lockdown, would still be the sitting ducks. So maybe in the long run, they'll be better off than us who are sitting in the lockdowns. We don't know. So this is the discussion that I wanted to have. I hope it makes sense. I wanted to talk about this interesting case that is happening in there. So just some of those questions and then we'll take off. What's your opinion about the health measures in USA referring? Oh man. So don't get me started on USA. I think in the USA, we have botched our response severely and badly. And I do not agree with administration's message that we could have had more deaths. No, for a 300 million people's country with advanced resources and sophisticated medical healthcare system, we should have done better than India. We should have done better than many other countries which are not at par with us. So we cannot say that, hey, we could have had more deaths. Yeah, we could have had more deaths, but we could also have saved us from the number of deaths we have now and the cases we have now by being better in our response. So I am not a very happy person about the way it's panning out here. So Chantal says, my concern is that our Prime Minister here in Australia is talking of reducing some of the restrictions over here within the next 2 to 4 months, which is not a really good idea. I agree with this. And again, every country, their epidemiology, their population distribution, their reproductive numbers are different. So I think countries and communities and human beings have to still figure out what is the best there is. I think there'll be a lot of literature developed afterwards, which would teach us the lessons for which country did what and what was good and what was bad. Because we are in the middle of the pandemic, there is no absolute answer at this time. Look, let's say we open up the lockdown today in the US, in Australia or other countries. People who would become sick would still need to have 2 weeks for incubation maximum. And then from there, another 8 weeks for hospitalizations and deaths or survivals. So that means we will not know the results for another 2.5 months. So these experiments would continue to happen. People will have to make decisions. I believe that it is not just the our individual decisions to see what for us and how we can be wise about it. So this is what is happening. I hope that it makes sense. My disclaimer is I'm not an epidemiologist, so I cannot figure out all the confounding factors that impact a community like Sweden. I am not a statistician that can do the extrapolations with logarithmic or other methods. I'm just doing linear extrapolations and kind of looking at the data in time. So this may all be totally incorrect way of looking at it or naive way of looking at it, but still there is an interesting data that Sweden compared to their neighbors who have lockdown, Sweden is doing much worse in the death rate, much better or almost at par in the case rate. And that is the interesting part. Taiwan is a great example. So look at this. When I was looking at it, there are some countries like South Korea, 51 million population, and look at their case rate, 0.02, about 6 times lesser than Sweden, and death rate 2.16, about 5 times lesser than Sweden. And they stopped themselves at 229 total deaths. Wow, that is amazing. Then look at Saudi Arabia, 33 million population, 83 total deaths. Spread rate, case rate 0.02%, death rate 1.3%. What did they do? Maybe we should learn from them. Taiwan is the most fascinating outcome. 23 million people's country, total infections 395 only, and total death 6. So negligible case rate and 1.52% death rate from that negligible case rate. What did they do? And again, I'm getting this data from here. So before you send me hate mails, look at this. This is the South Korea. Somewhere down here will be the Taiwan as well. Taiwan will be, so here, Taiwan 395 and 6 deaths. There is an asterisk here, which I do not know what that is. Maybe there is some qualifier to this, but Taiwan did something very interesting. What did they do with 23 million? This is almost double the population of Sweden. What did Saudi Arabia did? What did South Korea did? And I have done a discussion about South Korea. And what is it that is happening in Spain, Italy, US, Germany? What's going on there? So with this, thank you very much for your time. I wanted us to kind of look at what is happening in the other countries, especially Sweden, because they become a talk at this time with their approach. If you're all good, we will continue with our discussion tomorrow. For the time being, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay healthy, and all the healthcare folks who are here, students are working, thank you very much for your work. You are on the front lines. You are at risk as well. You are exposed on a daily basis, and I pray for you to stay healthy and happy, and thank you for your service. Hope says, don't send this doctor hate mail. I like him. So Hope, I have even received threats of various kinds, which are interesting. So there is someone who's saying that I can explain all your question, Dr. Bean, but please get together with Dr. Shiva. So definitely. All right, good. Thank you very much, guys. We will meet again tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.